So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar for 2025 for the Merlin European Research Project. My name is Jan Senzemir. I'm the moderator for today's webinar. We are quite lucky to have with us Linda Udkit. I'm desperately hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Denmark. And she is going to be speaking to us today about rewetting wetlands in Denmark. She comes to us having worked for over 3 years now with Danish Nature. But before that, she has more of a practical, non-academic background working with Arla Foods as a sustainability manager and also as an agricultural consultant in biodiversity, eco-schemes, project management, and fundraising. The format normally is a 30-minute presentation. It seems there's quite a lot, and that we'll go for 40 minutes with the lecture and then 20 minutes for questioning. At any time, please feel free to type in a question in the chat. I will be collecting all of them and will call you in turn at the end. So thank you very much, Linda, for joining us today. We look forward to your lecture. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try to share my screen and a presentation. Please let me know when everything looks as it should. Looks good.
It looks fine. Looks fine.
Great. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. In this webinar, I will share how we work with what we call climate lowland projects in Denmark. So the agenda is first a short introduction to the Danish Nature Agency where I work, the background to the current national ambition, how we work with these kinds of projects, the process in the projects, and what it means for the landowner to participate in such a project. I will also introduce some of the tools that we use, and lastly, some websites and links if you want to know more. So the Danish Nature Agency, Naturstyrelsen in Danish, is an agency under the new Ministry of Green Transition. The agency has existed for many years under different ministries, lately under the Ministry of Environment. We work from 16 local offices throughout the country, plus our headquarter. That gives us in-depth local knowledge about local conditions. We are about 650 employees in the agency, and we manage approximately 210,000 hectares of state-owned land, including national parks, forestry, so-called untouched forests, which is forest with biodiversity purpose, a little bit of organic farming, and of course, outdoor facilities and public access. This is a key job task in the Nature Agency. And finally, the climate lowland projects, where we are acting on private land. I will, of course, get much more into that. So a little bit of background to the current national ambition. The latest political agreements already in 2020, actually, it was decided to start taking carbon-rich soils out of production, and national funds was allocated to this. But before that, we in Denmark had already been working with these kinds of projects for plus 20 years via EU schemes, etc. But in 2021, Landbrugsaftalen, the agricultural agreement, was agreed between a majority of the Danish parliament to reduce CO2 emissions from the agricultural sector by 55 to 65% by 2030. The agreement also includes other goals, such as reduction of nitrogen leach to the aquatic environment and more. And an effective measure to help achieve these goals is to take carbon-rich soils and adjacent areas out of production, i.e. stop draining, tilling, fertilizing, etc. The ambition in 2021 was 100,000 hectares. And then in 2024, the Green Tripartite was agreed between the government, the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, the Danish Society for Nature Conservation, the Association of all 98 Danish municipalities, the Association for Danish Industry, and more. So it is more than 3 parties. The ambition was raised from taking 100,000 hectares of carbon-rich soils and adjacent areas out of production to 140,000 hectares. The Green Tripartite Agreement also includes 250 hectares of reforestation and more, but in this presentation I will focus on the carbon-rich soils. Afterwards, this was politically negotiated and agreed, and the new ministry was established as late as in November 2024, with full and only focus on implementing the Green Tripartite. Taking 140,000 hectares out of production to re-wet them is nationally financed, reserved on the Finance Act. In this context, it's actually a bit interesting that the latest mapping of carbon soils in Denmark, published in 2023, shows about 180,000 hectares of carbon-rich soils. So it actually means that the goal is to stop production on all of them. The previous mapping, about 10 years earlier, showed 170,000 hectares. Of course, data has improved over the past 10 years, so the latest mapping is more qualified, but it is also showcasing that the peat is decomposing and our peat soils are disappearing into the air, so to say, releasing enormous amounts of greenhouse gases in the process. So our part in the Nature Agency in this agreement is initially 56,850 hectares by 2032. The status now in 2024, or in 2024, status was 25,000 hectares in process. So we're already well on our way. So all in all, 1,040 million euros equals 7.8 billion Danish kroner is now allocated for the Nature Agency from 2022 to 2032 for this task. That equals an estimated average cost of approximately 18,300 euros per hectare. There are schemes, both nationally and EU funded, for lowland and wetland projects, some that private landowners can apply for directly, and some that only municipalities and actually also the Nature Agency can apply for. I'm focusing in this presentation on the climate lowland task. For the time being, about 56,000 hectares is in process nationally. So how do we work with these kinds of projects? In the Nature Agency, we have a project organization. We are approximately 40 project managers working on this national task of taking carbon-rich soils out of production and rewetting, and 5 people in our headquarters project team. We are organized so we work locally, but in close collaboration across the country. So our headquarter team is coordinating the task nationally in collaboration with internal and external stakeholders, and also ensuring internal knowledge sharing, support, and much more for the local project managers. These projects, of course, require collaboration with a lot of external partners as well to succeed. Municipalities, for example, we work closely together with the local municipalities, whom are also an authority on these areas in terms of, for example, protected nature. Other authorities in relation to permissions needed, for example, environmental screening. Consultants, technical, as an important partner in the the projects, assisting with technical and biological pre-investigations, detail planning, construction work, supervision, etc. And national corps of local agricultural consultants throughout the country offering consulting, guidance to farmers and landowners in relation to participating in a project. The service is free of charge for the landowners, as it is part of the financing of this green tripartite and the previous agricultural agreement. They can also support the municipalities and the Nature Agency in the dialogue with the farmers. Land consolidation planners, it's a department in our sister agency, so to say, and they play a crucial role in the projects. We have a national task force of 12 members from relevant agencies, agricultural organizations, including the mentioned corps, the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, municipalities, and more. Their task is to find and prioritize solutions to the obstacle we come across and communicate this to the relevant authorities. We also have a national expert group of 12 members representing relevant agencies, universities, municipalities, the agricultural sector, land surveyor, etc. Their task is to prepare solutions to the obstacles identified in 2023 and 2024, they published 2 reports with each 12 recommendations to take as much carbon-rich soils out of production as fast as possible. Recommendations were, for example, how to make it more attractive for landowners to participate in projects in relation to, for example, tax, compensation, etc., or how to support municipalities and the Nature Agency in taking land out of production, for example, with suggestions on how to minimize bureaucracy, improving data for prioritization. Expropriation was also a suggestion, but we don't use that. It is voluntary for the landowners to participate. Both reports can be found online, and I will share the link in the end of this presentation. So the process in a project, first of all, it's important to underline that it is voluntary for the landowners to participate. So a typical process flow could look something like this: a screening phase, where we first of all look for peat and carbon-rich soils. We use a GIS map, but also physical inspections in the field, where we do soil samples. We investigate the landscape. Is it at all possible to raise the water table? We look at the land use and protected nature, and we do a rough calculation of expected effects on CO2. So in short, do we believe that this project is feasible? In the preparation phase, we involve the municipality. If, of course, they're not already involved, sometimes it's the municipality that comes to us with a project idea. We will talk to key landowners, and not least, we will in this phase invite all landowners within the possible project area to a joint meeting to present the project idea, what, why, how, and the landowners' options to participate or not participate. We need the landowners to accept proceeding with pre-investigations since it's their privately owned land. If the landowners agree to pre-investigations, we will ask our management for a mandate to proceed. This includes description of the possible project, expected CO2 effects, budget, expected cost efficiency, etc. This is evaluated by our project team in the headquarters, economy department, and finally by the management. For pre-investigations, we involve external consultants. So the technical pre-investigations include, among a lot of other things, identifying drains, GPS measuring, surveying of ditches, waterways, and water table, soil samples on phosphorus, and maybe supplementary carbon soil samples, a calculation of current and future water table, a second and in this stage more qualified calculation of CO2 effects, effects on nitrogen expected reduction, and on phosphorus to calculate if there is an expected P leach. They will investigate for any technical installations such as windmills, power cables, sewage, roads, etc. And finally, they will suggest restoration measures to re-wet and any needed mitigations, which permissions are needed, and prepare a budget to implement the project. The biological pre-investigations include mapping of any existing nature, protected areas and species to take into account, permissions needed, and so forth. We also do a proprietary pre-investigation. And in this investigation, we in the Nature Agency consider ourselves an essential part of this, as we wish to appear present and approachable as project managers in relation to the landowners. As part of this task, we have individual meetings with each landowner to hear about their thoughts on the project, collect local knowledge about the area, and what their wishes might be in terms of participating and selling land consolidation, compensation, and so on. Altogether, the technical, biological, and proprietary pre-investigations serve as our basis for deciding if we should go on with implementing the project, and for the landowners' basis for deciding if they are interested in participating. Finally, did I skip to implementation? Yes. Finally, we invite all landowners to another joint meeting where we, together with the consultants, will present the results of the pre-investigations, and hopefully, normally, we will also use this meeting as a kickoff for land consolidation. Yeah. Land consolidation is an important part of the project. The Danish agricultural agency is our consultants, so to say, performing the land consolidation in close collaboration with the project manager. And I will tell you much more about land consolidation later on. Project agreements are made with any landowners who prefer to keep their land and receive a compensation for rewetting. Environmental assessment and permissions from authorities regarding protected natural areas and species, Natura 2000, etc., is also running in the implementation phase with assistance from our consultants. Especially environmental assessment and permissions and land consolidation may take quite a long time, depending on scale and complexity of the project. Years maybe, hence the years to the right, meaning a project could take from maybe 3 to several more years. Detail planning will normally run parallel to the other activities in the implementation phase. And finally, the actual construction work, so closing ditches, drains, etc. Throughout this process, with pre-investigations, land consolidation, environmental assessment, and permissions, and so on, the project boundaries will almost certainly change from the initial idea until the final project, either due to landowners who doesn't wish to be part of it or other needs for changing something. So finally, final inspections are conducted with the landowners, if they are still landowners and didn't sell, and construction workers, and any needed amendments are agreed upon. When everything is completed, any land that the nature agency might still own after the land consolidation is normally sold again by tender, meaning that anyone can bid on it. The nature agency is not meant to own the land after the project is finalized. So what does this mean to the landowner to participate in a climate lowland project? As I mentioned already, it's voluntary for the landowners to participate. Therefore, we will of course not convince them to participate if we cannot offer them something that is at least as good as what they already have. So their options are to sell either just the parcel within the project area or sometimes the entire property. Maybe some are about to retire and it seems like a good idea. If we buy the entire property, we can often use the area in rotation outside the project area for replacement land for those who wish land consolidation. In land consolidation, we try to find suitable land replacement for the land that is being rewetted, maybe closer to the farm or in other ways an attractive replacement. And finally, they can choose compensation. If the landowner wishes to keep the land, they will sign a project agreement and a wetland declaration and receive a compensation. And depending on the former use of the land, the compensation will vary. They can choose both compensation and land use. They can choose both compensation and land consolidation for the same area and, for example, use the compensation to buy new land. The compensation per hectare is for arable land in rotation, about 11,000 euros. For permanent grassland, it's about 4,730 euros. And for natural areas, shrub land, it's about 600 euros per hectare. On the other hand, the agricultural sector is now looking into a CO2 tax on emissions starting from 2030 with 16 euros per ton, increasing to 40 euros per ton in 2035. A permanent wetland declaration will be declared on the land, and it is thereby prohibited to drain, till, fertilize, spray, and do any supplementary feeding of livestock and or wildlife. It is still allowed, where possible, if it's not too wet, to do grazing, hay cuts, or go hunting as before. So just to introduce some of the tools we use in these projects, a very important tool, so to say, is the land consolidation. First of all, a land valuation is being made where all land within the project area is being valuated. It is done by a group put together of up to five landowner representatives. The landowners choose the representatives themselves, actually, and then two valuation experts, one from the Danish Agricultural Agency and one local agricultural consultant. The consultant is also chosen by the landowners. Finally, the land consolidation planner for the project area will participate, as he will afterwards be doing the land consolidation. The group will walk through every parcel together in the project area, which sometimes takes several days if it's a big project area. Index 100 is a field that the group will agree which field is the best in the area. Normally it's outside the project area, and this field is called Index 100 and is used as reference for all the other parcels within the project area. The other parcels will be indexed accordingly. For example, Index 50 is a parcel in the project area that is valued to be worth 50% of Index 100. For example, if Index 100 is worth 200,000 Danish kroner, then Index 50 will be worth 100,000 Danish kroner. Now, did I say 100 before also? So, Index 100 worth 200,000 Danish, then Index 50 is worth 100,000 Danish. All the landowners can participate in a land consolidation. They can buy or sell land and or sell land. Sometimes landowners from outside the project area can participate if they can contribute in the project by selling, often, land that is of interest to some of the landowners from the project area. When participating in land consolidation, you save some costs for administration, matriculation, etc., as the project will take these costs. All agreements will be effected on the same day in a land consolidation. Of the more technical tools, we use the so-called peat map. We use this for prioritizing to calculate the CO2 effect and the cost efficiency, cost per ton of CO2 reduction, and in the dialogue with landowners. The carbon-rich soils in Denmark are categorized as 6 to 12% carbon and more than 12% carbon. Less than 6% carbon is categorized as mineral soil in this context. For each project, we will also calculate the CO2 effect. This takes into account the land use before project implementation And the map that I just showed you before, the area of, yeah, so the land use will take into account area in rotation, permanent grass, and natural areas. And the area of these categories consisting of 6 to 12% carbon and plus 12% carbon. The model will then assume that everything, so to say, is being wet or saturated, except any area that we specify as not affected, including a buffer to these specified areas. Based on this CO2 calculation and our budget for the given project, we will calculate the expected cost efficiency. And the frame is a maximum of 1,147 euros per ton CO2 reduction. And this amount can only be exceeded and only by the double, so 2 times, if more goals are targeted on nature, environment, and climate adaptation. This means that a lower cost efficiency than 1,147 euros per ton CO2 can only be accepted if the project will also significantly improve biodiversity and deliver on a reduction in nutrient leach to the aquatic environment. The nitrogen calculation takes into account the catchment area, the area of sandy soils, land use before, and average yearly rainfall, and more. Equally, we will do a calculation on phosphorus based on some of the same, but also on soil samples. So approximately 1 soil sample per 1.5 hectare. If the calculation shows a loss of phosphorus to the aquatic environment, we also calculate an NP exchange rate. This means that a big permanent reduction of N against a smaller and temporary loss of P not will hinder a project. However, if the P calculation and exchange rate shows a bigger problem with P loss, then it will conclude that there is a need to mitigate P loss and calculate the need for P reduction. The models are developed by the Environmental Protection Agency and Aarhus University, and calculation of N and P is also important to the environmental screening of the projects. So, finally, some websites and links. First of all, each project has its own individual homepage where all reports, maps, calculated effects, presentations from meetings, etc., are accessible to the public. And finally, some links. At udtagning.dk, you can find links, information about, for example, the task force and the expert group, and you will also be able to find the 2 reports with recommendations. At udtagningskort.dk, you can have a look at the PMAP. This is a screening tool, udtagningskort. At vandprojekter.dk, you have an overview of and info about all the schemes for lowland and wetland projects, including the calculation sheets and guides and much more. You can find all the information there. And finally, at naturstyrelsen.dk, you can find information about all the projects in the Nature Agency and info about the Nature Agency, and yeah, much more. It's all in Danish. I have to, unfortunately, but I think sometimes Google offers to translate when you visit a website in a foreign language. So I hope you will find what you're looking for. Yep, that was all for me for now. And I think I will stop presenting to be able to see everyone. And if I need to, I will just present again to find any slides if it's needed.
Thank you very much, Linda, for a very clear and very concise presentation.
I hope I didn't kill you all.
Well, people like me with hearing problems love it when people speak so clearly and deliberately, so it helps a lot. We have 7 questions so far, and at any time during the question period, people please put new questions in the chat. The first question is from Ray White. What are carbon-rich soils in comparison with other kinds of soils? I believe you answered that, but if you want to elaborate, please do.
Yeah, no, I hope I answered that with the peat map. We categorize them as carbon-rich soils if they have more than 6% of carbon, and then they're again categorized in 6 to 12 and above 12. So it's not necessarily peat.
Fine. The next question is from Odette Gonzalez. Could you explain a little bit more about the coordination between the National Task Force and the expert group, if there is any?
Yeah, there are no overlap between the two groups in terms of persons participating. In my mind, I tend to think of the task force as more of a with a practical focus, and the expert group with the reports trying to summarize and publish the recommendations and yeah.
Okay. The third question is from Chorven Roveda of BioConsult. Which method are you using to calculate the expected effects of CO2 reduction?
Yeah, so we take into consideration the before land use, how many areas in rotation, and also in Denmark for each field we will have a code, a crop code, so-called crop code. Every year when the farmers apply for the EU subsidies, they will indicate what crop is in each field. And with this map, we know exactly what crops there were, and we know, So in this context, we can calculate the CO2, the expected CO2 loss before. You will know what crops, if it's a permanent grass or a crop in rotation, you will know what's the expected CO2 emissions with this data compared to the data of the carbon. So how much carbon is there in the soil, and what's the rotation? And then you will the model will assume that after rewetting it's all saturated, except from the areas that we specify that these will not be affected. Maybe because it's already wet, maybe there is a small lake or something that we cut out and say this will not be affected, this is already wet, or this will not be affected, it will remain dry. yeah, it's if you go into the website vanprojekter.dk, I believe we can share the links. You already shared the links, I see. You can find the sheets actually. I know they're in Danish, but maybe yeah, you can read something out of them, how they're set up. Otherwise, contact me again. If I'm not able to answer, then I'm definitely able to find someone who are more able than I am.
We have a follow-up question from Odette Gonzalez. For the screening, do you have any minimum number of hectares for starting a project?
Not as such. Um, you, if it's a small project area, maybe we can do it quickly, and that's also appreciated. But there is sort of a differentiation, yeah, differentiating, yeah, between as I just briefly mentioned, there are other schemes that landowners can privately apply for. So if a single landowner, maybe a landowner and a neighbor, want to take a small area out of production, they can apply for themselves, or a municipality or other organizations can apply. And in the larger and more complex projects where land consolidation is needed, it's typically more common that we or a municipality would go with that kind of project. Sometimes projects even cross municipality borders, and in that case, it could also be the nature agency that are project owners. So there are schemes where you can apply directly if you have a small and more simple project idea, and for the larger, it's yeah more yeah, we would often go with those. Yeah.
The next question is from Joshua Reut of the Nature Conservancy. There are two questions. When done, can you go back to the original investments in hectares to be restored? And he said the first question, do you have good proof of concept that show methods for rewetting that works well and doesn't end up producing more methane, for example, from causing anaerobic decomposition from peat and drowned living plant matter, and impacts downstream impacts on streams and wildlife, bird life and beaver? That's the first question, and maybe I'll
Oh,
save the second
yeah,
till you've looked at the first.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is of course a discussion here as well. Um, there are so many variables in these projects, and in some projects there will probably be some methane loss. Hopefully, it would be temporary, as it, to my understanding, often also is more likely when there is more nutrients in the area. Um, but the overall understanding is that compared to the areas in rotation, peat decomposing, um, the NO2, I don't remember the English word for it. This compared to taking the areas out of production and saturating them to yeah, save the carbon, so to say. The overall understanding is that even though there are some methane emissions, they are uh, smaller than the pre emissions. but so many variables, and I wouldn't be able to say something, this is how it is.
Okay, the second question is also, is that the value price per hectare, and would that change for backlands that are lower and separate out of the house near the road? For instance, do you divide parcels in this methodology?
So this group of landowners and valuation experts will consider every single parcel within the project area. And with this methodology, the genius thing, I think, is that this index 100 field, it can change, if a land consolidation will go on maybe for 1 year, maybe for 2 or several years, the land, the prices can go up or down. Currently, they're mostly going up, but it could go both ways. So instead of indexing the best field, instead of putting a price on it, we put an index on it, meaning that if the prices go up, the price will go up, but the indexing is the same. So if index 100 is 200,000 Danish kroner, then index 50 will be 100,000. But if index 100 will raise to 220,000 kroner during this process, then index 50 will be 110. So the indexing makes the system flexible. I hope I understood the question correct.
Mm-hmm. The next question is from Matilde Faccini. What are the criteria that defines a land as index 100?
They are valued from an agricultural point of view. So they will look at the soil, if it's what they will consider good soil, where, for example, a very sandy soil would not be valued as good. They will look at the size of the field and that it doesn't have too many odd corners or wet holes, or that it's a regular field of good soil. And so these are the criteria that they rate. They will actually, on this valuation day where they go through all fields, they bring with them a shovel. They are all in their rubber boots. They bring with them a shovel and they will just dig into it and have a look at it. And all the area, the fields within the project area are valued. Many of them will maybe be more nature-like, some of them, and they will be valued as compared to if some of them are maybe protected nature and has restrictions, agricultural has restrictions on agricultural use on them, which will rate them lower compared to areas with no restrictions.
The next question is from Lawrence Carvalho. 2 questions. 1, I'm intrigued how the policy was ever agreed in Parliament without major opposition from the farming community. That's the first one. Maybe, and I'll leave the second
Maybe more
after you've
comment.
answered.
Yeah. Was that a question?
I get
the question how it did go through the Parliament.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, the agricultural sector has been a big part of the agreements all along the way. The lobbyists and their organizations has been a big part of the negotiations. it has been for many years. And yeah, I think the agricultural sector also knows that there are so many things going on, both in climate and water. One thing is the CO2 emissions. Another thing is that these areas, especially in the river valleys, they are more and more wet, and maybe it's also in their interest, and they know that they need to deliver on the climate agenda, and they know that, and now it has been agreed and finally approved, but for quite some time there has been talk about this CO2 tax. So yeah, so it's in their interest to be around the table negotiating how can we then do it in the best possible way for the farmers. And they are compensated, and most farmers really appreciate the land consolidations. And as I said earlier, it's voluntary to participate. So if we cannot find a solution that is attractive to the farmer, he will just say, no, thank you then. So it is rather attractive solutions. And they have, of course, been a big part of negotiating that. Yeah.
So the second part of the question is this maintaining sufficient productive land to support feeding Denmark's population, or is it expected to lead to a need for more imported food?
Oh, I think I don't know these numbers exactly, but on a great deal of products, I know that we export. So we are plenty more than self-sufficient. But it's more a question if we will lose income, so to speak. But a lot of these carbon-rich soils are, as I mentioned, in the river valleys, and they are increasingly wet, both due to the peat decomposing, so they are more and more low, the lowlands, and also due to more and more rainfall and higher groundwater tables. And yeah, so the river valleys are not the hardest. It's more, if we, yeah, no, yeah. I hope that was answer.
Thanks, that's great.
The final question is from Kearney from Nature Scott in Scotland. Am I right in understanding that it is the Danish government that will buy the land if the farmer landowner wants to sell? And the second part is, do you have a big budget for land buying for these types of projects in Denmark?
Yeah, that's correctly understood. If he wants to sell, we will buy them, and sometimes it will pass on already in the land consolidation, but very often, most likely, after implementation of the project, the Danish government will own quite a lot of land, and we're not supposed to keep ownership of this. So when the project is implemented and the permanent wetland declaration is finalized, we will sell this surplus area, so to say, by tender.
Before closing, I want to point out that Lawrence Carvalho has very kindly pasted into the chat the link where the Danish case study for Merlin at Kvarning. So if you want more information, please consult that link. So very hearty thanks to you, Linda, for excellent presentation, very clear. I think it satisfied everybody. So thanks again. I now want to announce that there will be next month, the next webinar will be one of the results from the Merlin project given by Tom Bausi, Upscaling Freshwater Ecosystem Restoration for People and Nature with Nature-Based Solutions. So please keep posted, follow the website for the date of the webinar, and there may be some more background information.
Look at how timely we are.
Excellent.
Thanks, Linda, also from my side for this.
Yep,
excellent
thanks a lot.